is not going to talk about Antonio Brown. You want to listen about Antonio Brown? Go to Dan Patrick. Go to Colin Cowherd. Certainly go to Clay Travis. I mean, Clay Travis is a great show. I love him. And so, but he's got a lot to say. In fact, I would encourage you to go listen to Clay Travis outkick the coverage. Go ahead, just after this show though, you download his podcast. Great show. But I mean, honestly, let's not dominate our NFL talk with Antonio Brown. Let's just not do it. So we're not going to do it. We're going to stand by. Steve Wilson, the Speedway Digest, is going to do a quick recap of some NASCAR here in just a few moments. As soon as he joins us here, and we'll get him on here in just a minute, and then we'll get into some college football talk. And guess what? The world is moving on without Antonio Brown. So we've drank our cleansed juice. We've sat on the toilet for a few minutes here. We have cleansed ourselves from Antonio Brown. Let's move on. And move on we will on this show. So officially, this is it for Antonio Brown talk. Now, if something breaking happens that's actually news, which very well could happen with the NFL, then we'll jump right into it. But something way more important than Antonio Brown's on the line now. Steve Wilson, the Speedway Digest editor-in-chief. Steve, how are you doing, sir?
I don't know if I'm more important than him. I mean, he gets, like $9 million play for the Patriots?
Well, then we got all these other stories that are coming out. So I made a promise to my audience on social media that we're doing a cleansing of Antonio Brown. No more Antonio Brown talk. I am done talking about Antonio Brown. Want to talk some NASCAR. Last week, I tell you what, and I enjoyed being the privilege of helping you being boots on the ground at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway last weekend for the Brickyard. It was a fun race to watch, and as we put up on your site there, SpeedwayDigest.com, first, I mean, there was a father and his daughter, first time she'd ever been to a race, and then there was a guy named Reggie. He'd been to every single race there at Brickyard and other NASCAR races, but he's a big Bubba Wallace fan. I tell you what, it's unfortunate when I was telling my friend Melissa was with me. As we looked across out turn 4, what a great race it was. I mean, we had action-packed action. Kevin Harvick wins. We saw Jimmy Johnson get bumped out, and I listened to his scanner during the qualifying P5, had a good starting position. All of those stories combined for a good weekend, but because for whatever reason people just like, well, there's never no passing, there's never no action at Indianapolis with NASCAR, so we're going to stay home. Now they've moved the date again. But it was disappointing to see the fans not there, because if you weren't there and you watched it on television, you know that you missed a really good race out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Steve.
Well, unfortunately, I think we're in Indianapolis, and we've seen this just not at Indy, but we've seen it at other places too, is that, I mean, we all have to come to the realization, even NASCAR is saying this these days, that we understand that people are staying home, and television ratings are down. Although this year we've had a slight uptick on both. We've seen races where more people are coming out too, and we're seeing increases both on Fox and NBC. So I think NASCAR has left the mentality that they're at the highest of high, as they were in the 90s and early 2000s, and they've now moved on to they have a new base. They have a base that's getting older, so they're out there trying to recruit new fans to not only come to the track, but give them a reason to watch on TV. And I think that we move things around, as you've said, that next year we're moving the traditional Firecracker 400 at Daytona to the end of the season. And that's going to be the last regular season cutoff race at Daytona, and we're moving Indy to July 4th. I think a lot of this is, we're trying to recruit a new base. We're trying to give a fresh perspective to the schedule because a lot of people have continued to say for the last 10-plus years, we go to the same places, we go there at the same time, we never change anything. Well, NASCAR finally listened and said, okay, you say we don't go to the same places, you say we go to the same at the same time every year. Well, let's throw this thing, a monkey wrench into this thing. Let's start the conversation by moving some of these dates. Let's combine Pocono. Let's do some other things. And in 2021 or 2021, when the track agreement comes to pass, then maybe we can shake this thing up a little bit more. And I think these are all moves that NASCAR is making to not only increase the attendance, but also increase the television viewing audience because they're giving them more of a reason to do so. By changing things, that sometimes gives an opportunity for people to see something different or think something different is going to happen. And that may well be true, but we've got to get into 2020 and see how that happens. As for Indy, it was a crazy race, and I think we continue to see restart after restart and cautions out there, and the freak accident by Brad Keselowski sitting on top of the tire barrier. So, a lot of these things.
Which was a freaky wreck, by the way. Oh, I'm sorry. Which was a freaky wreck, by the way. And honestly, I texted you right away. I mean, because normally we see drivers get out of the car. I don't mean to divert here, but normally we see drivers get out of the car right away. When the camera went to that angle, we saw I think even though the track was molliardly empty because of only 50,000 people there, it was still very, very quiet. And we had Brad Keselowski's scanner on, not by design, just happened to have it on, just scanning, and it was nothing. It was dead silent, Brad, and then it was just nothing. And so we were worried. At first, I was just like, this is not good. And then he got out of the car, and there was a bunch of smoke. He looked like some sort of superhero coming out. Wow! But clearly, him and Eric Jones both were dazed. So you brought that freak accident up, but my gosh, it was scary there for a moment there, Steve. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No, but just to expand upon that is that earlier this week I got a chance to talk to Brad Keselowski on that particular incident. And he's talked to Indianapolis Motor Speedway on that, and he feels that not just there at Indy, but at the road courses too, where use tire barriers in places that they have not placed soft wall or safer walls. He feels that he would like to see an evolution or a revolution into this, where these tire barriers are replaced with soft walls, and in doing so, he understands that some of these walls are not of the most optimal shape to place these safer barriers. So he would like to see these walls redesigned in some of these places so that it could accept the safer barrier, especially on some of these places that they are impacting at. And not only that, but you also look at Landon Castle there at Indianapolis too. I mean, he slammed that outside wall very, very hard. That it hit the wall so hard that it crumpled the roof deck on the car. So that's a major impact. And we saw Landon Castle get out of the car. So, the safety is improving in the sport, and there's room to improve, as there always is. And NASCAR and the tracks recognize this. And, the drivers have their opinions of where they would like to see this stuff happen, and I think that he brings up a valid point.
Well, absolutely, and we only got just a limited amount of time here because we're going to jump into some college football stuff. But let's talk about Jimmy Johnson for a second. What a disappointment that it was for him, and as he talked to us there in the media center after the race on Sunday. bottom line is he shouldn't have to take ownership for it, but maybe he does because he's the driver of he's the driver of the 48 car there. But he said they shouldn't have been in this situation to begin with. There's a lot of things that led up to this, and they felt good about the qualifying position P5. Again, going back to Rex there at Indianapolis, and I don't know. I just think that Indianapolis is a good track. It was, of course, it was not designed for stock car racing, but the point is, it's Indianapolis. It's not going to go away. The fans need to go support that, but at the same time, as Jimmy said, it shouldn't have came down to Indianapolis whether or not we are or not in the playoffs, and it was the first time he's missed the playoffs ever. How big of a picture are we seeing here with Jimmy Johnson? Are we seeing – because Jimmy Johnson is used to being successful at the highest level. And if he can't be successful at the highest level, maybe he himself, not that the team or anybody else is pushing him out, but maybe he himself will do some self-reflection and say, if I can't do it at the highest level, I don't want to do it. Are we seeing the outskirts of the retirement of Jimmy Johnson?
I think so. I'm not here to try and start any rumors because I don't know factually one way or the other, but just from my perspective of things is that you look like, Lowe's left the team, Ally came on board for 2 years, this year and next year. That gave some speculation as to the fact of, that, this may be the waning years of Jimmy Johnson's career in the Cup Series. Jimmy, for his effort, he has a lifetime contract at Hendrick Motorsports, just like Jeff Gordon did, and he will leave that 48 car when Jimmy Johnson wants to leave the 48 car. So from my perspective of it all is that, yes, I do think, obviously Jimmy is in his 40s. We've got other drivers in their 40s. Jimmy Johnson didn't win this year. Jimmy Johnson had a lot of problems this year. He had Chad Knaus, which had been his longtime crew chief, shifted over to the 24 car. He got a new crew chief. That didn't seem to make it any better. And I guess, Jimmy Johnson has to be looking at some other drivers out there. You look at Kevin Harvick, who won. He's in his 40s, and he's still going out there. And I know there was speculation early on in the season as to when he was going to go to victory lane. But, here he is. He went to victory lane 3 times this year. Denny Hamlin's near his 40s. He's in his late 30s. He went to victory lane multiple times this year. So, I think in totality of it all is that I do think that, at some point Jimmy Johnson in the next handful of years is going to retire. I think that we can probably just go ahead and say that for a fact, because he's not the kind of person that's just going to hang on and drive around in the middle and drive around in the back and not be competitive. He's very smart, and he's very aware as to the fact of where he stands in the series. I think he's very physically fit, and to go out there and race these cars. I think the demand of these cars, that's not the problem. The problem I think here is that the drivers in this sport are starting younger and younger than they ever have before. Jimmy Johnson didn't get a car until he was, somewhere around his teens or something like that. I mean, he had raced go-karts and, off and on, like motorbikes, things like that. But, he started his career much later than a lot of other drivers do today, which start off in go-karts at 5, 6 years old. They are so competitive that by the time that they get to the trucks or even to the Xfinity series, that they've surpassed some of these older drivers didn't start until later in their career, which means by the time they get to the Cup Series, they are so competitive that the competition level is just not by a handful of drivers anymore. It's a half a field or more of drivers that are competitive on a week-to-week basis. And, not to say that Jimmy Johnson isn't competitive, because he is. He's very competitive. I just think that the talent level in the sport continues to explode exponentially every year that passes. And for every driver that starts younger and younger, the talent just explodes by the time that they are